The best description of Russians' information that I know is this quote from Black Sabbath: "Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds." Russia tries to find or even create breaking points in societies. Putin do not need you to believe him. He wanna make you hate next guy. So divided we fall. And our only chance to stand is to act, not react.
For people around the world today, the internet is a major source of information and news. This has only become more true in the era of social media and smartphones as young people and citizen journalists share content, articles and information directly with their audiences, often bypassing centralised or professional media outlets. But we cannot take access to the internet for granted. Recent years have seen either partial or complete shutdowns of public internet access in several countries, including Iran, Myanmar and India, which have inhibited access to information, stifled debate and curtailed people's abilities to protest or demonstrate. The question is, what can be done to ensure that ordinary people have free and open access to the internet, free from the fear of arbitrary or politically motivated shutdowns?
The involvement of civil society is critical for tackling different propaganda narratives. Therefore, states have to look for different ways to engage civil society and multiply their resources through people.
We can all build resilience by keeping our generation informed and devoid of fake news toxicity. Because every activist and human rights fighter will tell you, knowing what is happening is the first line of defense against an authoritarian government. With a trilateral agreement signed between Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova, the young people of these countries have become more aware and more sympathetic to each country's security issues, the need of common values, freedoms, and how loud can voices against injustice and aggression sound together.
Good day. Very happy to welcome everyone to this second day of the conference, Democracy in Action. And it's a great honor for me to inaugurate the second day and talk about the cities. This is my very favorite topic. It's so important for us. The Ukrainian cities compete with the global cities. It's a competition amongst the cities. But the Ukrainian cities face a lot of challenges. Cities close to the front line still are under threat, and the question is how fast should they step up modernization, how do they retain the youth and the talent facing the threat of aggression. And other cities face their own challenges, often internal challenges, and corruption is amongst the top three, and the others are migration, talent drain, economic difficulties. And it's very important for us to talk to the leaders of the Ukrainian cities, to talk together, to think together, and find solutions on how to tackle the threats. What are the available instruments so that the Ukrainian cities could thrive and compete globally. There's a global urbanization trend, and we know that a lot of American cities have become the powerful hubs of influence, and they grow stronger and can trigger change in the country. Kyiv, as the Ukrainian capital, plays a major role on the global arena, so we'll talk about the challenges and solutions on how do we make our life safer, cleaner, and free of corruption. Today we have a chance to talk to the leader of Kyiv, Vitali Klitschko, and we have Yuriy Bova joining us online, who is the mayor of Trostyanets, and we'll have Oleksandr Senkevych, who is the mayor of Mykolaiv city. Mr. Vitali, Kyiv is a trendsetter, so you have the welcoming address to give us a good impetus of what we can do better. If I could stand up. Good day, dear friends. Let me start by saying that attending this high-level conference is a great honor for me, and the close scrutiny of the international community on the efforts to combat corruption and the involvement of so many participants is very heartwarming and gives us hope that we can prevail in this fight. Later on, I will elaborate what I mean by prevailing in the fight. We hope that Ukraine and all of us will succeed. Some would say that corruption, which is the subject matter of our discussion today, only permits poor countries. I would put it differently. Corruption is the root cause. It's the origin of poverty and an enemy of development. It starts with the mistrust of the people in a public official demanding a bribe. Then this mistrust spreads to the government because of 1,000 of public officials who take their graft. And then it spreads on to the country. And people see injustice. And then people lose faith in the democracy itself. So we should ask ourselves the question. We are seeing this manifest in our country, but what do the Ukrainians do about it? The answer is straightforward. They leave Ukraine. And those who can't leave go into internal immigration. That's manifest by total depression, apathy, mistrust with the government, mistrust with politicians, mistrust with each other. The crisis of trust detriments Ukraine just as much as the economic crisis does. This year, Ukraine is celebrating 30 years of its independence and 30 years of combating corruption, which is similar to fighting a windmill. The process for the process' sake, statistics for the sake of reporting. But the question is it a fight for justice? It's not fair when people delegated an MP to represent their rights and they vote for someone else. It's not fair when instead of ProZorro procurement, the public procurement are offered on an exclusive basis. It's not fair when costs from the budget are disclosed and not reported to the public. When does that happen? The corruption manifests itself where the system fails. So we can only prevent corruption by installing fair, equitable system. The municipal councils and mayors, unlike the central government, don't have the powers to reform the courts, to reform the law enforcement agencies. We, for our part, in Kyiv, in the heart of Ukraine, in the Ukrainian capital, have started changes. We are beginning to irradiate changes. I hope my colleagues don't take offense, but at the level of Kyiv, we implemented systemic changes, excluding the potential for corruption. If I may elucidate, one of the key safeguards against corruption is the transparency. Kyiv was the first to implement the Prozoro procurement system. 1,800 structural units of the Kyiv administration make procurements through Prozoro procurement system exclusively. And in a few years, we have saved up for the budget of our community over 9 million hryvnia, 4.5 million just last year. Preventing corruption. Udar, party that I've been leading since 2012. In 2012, was at the spearhead of the fight to make justice prevail in parliament. If the people elected their MPs, they have to vote for themselves. Proxy voting should never happen. The first step I made when I joined the Kyiv government was about putting in a system where no proxy voting could happen. And so far, the Kyiv City Council remains the only agency, the only council where proxy voting cannot happen, because proxy voting is a variety of political corruption, and we hope other cities will follow us. Now the Verkhovna Rada is starting to implement a similar system, and we hope in near future it will become operational. Accessibility. Overcoming petty corruption. Earlier, to place a child in a kindergarten, you would need to find a municipal councillor to help you out, or you could give a tip, pay a bribe. We have settled this problem by implementing the electronic registration queue to the kindergartens. It's already operating for a number of years. And this year, we eliminated the problem altogether. There's no queue to the kindergartens. We reopened 33 kindergartens, and now 1,200 people no longer have to wait to place their child in a kindergarten. Openness, one of the key components. Now, close to this place, there is a landscape alley. We inaugurated it at a city day a week ago. All the costs from the budget for the renovations, all the budgetary expenses on expenses of the city administration, district administration, schools and kindergartens are made public, and every resident, every journalist can review the expenses, and that is a priority. And these are the ways we tackle corruption at a systemic level. But they need to be disseminated beyond Kyiv. Other cities have to embrace these practices too. Step by step, we need to be doing it, decision after decision. But that's not all. But there's another interesting variety of corruption. So, when people cry out that they are combating corruption and instead they are pursuing their political agenda. You will know that recently the communal utility enterprises of Kyiv experienced a tsunami of searches. It's been covered in the mass media. To explain what's happening, we need to give you some background. Since 2015, the Department of Internal Audit and Control conducted inspections and audits of 385 entities, and all the findings of the audit were presented to the law enforcement agencies. The officials who were suspected of corruptions were dismissed. For years, these documents collected dust with the law enforcers and nothing happened. And all of a sudden, they were brought to the surface right now. And the same cases were reopened based on the same evidence and findings we presented to the law enforcement agencies. And we are under charges based on the same evidence. We are very happy to cooperate with the law enforcement. We are very open with sharing all the information. But this is not true cooperation. It looks much more manipulative. This is not cooperation. I regard it as political pressure. Pursuing political agendas under the disguise of combating corruption is a form of corruption. It's political corruption. So what is political corruption? When in the high echelons of power, multi-hour meetings are conducted to come up with a plan on how to stage an attack on a mayor. And that is political corruption. When the head of the State Fiscal Service, which needs to be reformed and disbanded altogether, when he is offered the head in the Bureau of Economic Security in exchange for massive searches of the local government institution, that is political corruption. When, despite the law, despite the will of the Kyivans, despite the constitution, appointments are attempted to replace the current Kyiv city administration head, that is corruption. That is the violation of the law. And I want to say it openly for everyone to understand. By implementing the anti-corruption laws, by setting up the anti-corruption agencies, we need to bear in mind that the key KPIs of combating corruption isn't the statistics, a position, or performances, or lofty launches that we've grown weary of. The key KPI of combating corruption is the level of trust people have with the government, level of trust with the country, the desire to live and work in their country. And that is a true KPI. And our key objective is to restore trust of the people. Indeed, all of us need to demonstrate that the Ukrainian country can thrive. The Poles have made it a success, so had the Czechs, and so shall we. And we do everything to that end. What does it mean for a country to be successful? A thriving country is one that is successful not just for the elite or for the top officials. A successful country is a country where people know that fairness will prevail, that law is above everything. We are now celebrating 30 years of independence of Ukraine, and 30 years is a good anniversary to look back and to take stock of what's been done and stop going round in circle. That never happens in a robust European country. The robust European countries enjoy rule of law and justice, where the governments work for the people, and not the other way around, when people work for the governments. And one more important prerequisite: a successful country is one where corruption cannot take root. And that is precisely the country we are fighting for. Myself, as no one else, I know firsthand that we need to fight. We need to fight for our principles and values. We need to fight for our cities. We need to fight for our countries. I used to fight. I used to fight on the boxing ring in full sight, and I did so honestly. And I bring the same principles into politics. And above all, as every Ukrainian, I feel very strongly when I see injustice. I'm certain that we will step up the fight everywhere. We'll keep fighting for our country, for jobs for all, for fair pay, for rule of law, for justice. That is the country we are all fighting for. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to take your questions, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions and give you more examples of how the city of Kyiv is sparing no effort to make the processes clear and transparent and to leave no space for corruption.
Насправді дуже цінні інсайти. Я вдячна за те, що ви згадали про те, що про Прозоро, це, зокрема, той проект, який ми підтримали як фонд Western NIS Enterprise Fund, як один з перших донорів. Так, і ми дуже раді, що Київ перший долучився. Можливість зареєструвати дитину в садочок випробую особисто. Так, нам це вже стає актуально, і думаю, через півроку спробуємо. У мене дуже коротке запитання.
I have a very short question to make sure we have time to engage the participants from the other cities in town. You mentioned that not everything can be tackled at the local level. What can a mayor do to fight even petty corruption? Where do you want the help of the government? Where does the government need to step in? I think it's relevant for any Ukrainian city and town. Iryna, I mentioned what the government has to do in my address. what needs to be done is to cooperate with the law enforcement, but not the way it's done in Kyiv. We relegated the documents and then nothing happened. Those who commit a crime have the impression that they could perpetuate it and they won't be punished. Ordinary people, though, have to ask the question, is there justice at all in this world? Therefore, I'm convinced that robust cooperation with the law enforcement is a must, so that any individual who could even think about stealing from the budget or breaking a law needs to know for sure that this individual will be held accountable for their offences. This is also one of the key prerequisites for combating corruption, for preventing it. Examples abound from the everyday life. However, it's about joint effort. I can give you so many examples from my work as a mayor, where business people or ordinary people come to me and they say, someone is extorting a bribe from me to get some things addressed. And they go to me and they ask for help. Please, we want to record this. So the person involved in this misconduct needs to be held liable. And in 99%, the reply that they get was like, sorry, I need to get my problems addressed, not to become an avid anti-corruption fighter. So sometimes people give bribe and then they complain about corruption, but actually these people are complicit in corruption. They are helping corrupt officials. It takes more than one person. It's about changing the system, as I said. It's about changing the mindset. And we are trying to fight this outrageous practice for 30 years now. Vitali, I hope that this platform and this conference will give voice to those who want to raise the issue, so that all the central government and local government will do our best to make this country transparent and happy and free of corruption. Iryna, I would like to extend my thanks to the international partners. Thanks to the partners and the German company SAP, which is a leading IT company. So Kyiv city was the first city to introduce open budget. It's made available for any journalist or any individuals. Transparency is a safeguard against corruption. We want to remove the official from the decision-making mechanism. We want to create an algorithm for issuing documents based on the leading world practice and the best practices worldwide. We want to maximize the transparency of the processes. So I would like to thank the partners who assisted us in doing this. These mechanisms are being implemented. I mentioned the open budget, personal voting, ProZorro procurement system, and many more things are sadly still happening. But it's about transforming the system and transforming the mindset of the ordinary people. You know, we have this saying, you have to oil the wheels in order to get things done, i.e. to bribe people. But this is not something I want to see happening. And I talk to all of you. If you have encountered this, please go to us. We will legally try to address this, but you need to help us in fighting corruption as well. Okay, it's time to talk to your colleagues and counterparts here. And I would like to ask the question about the cutting-edge technology. You mentioned that some tools are already in place in Ukraine. Does the open budget already operate in your cities? This is the question to Oleksandr and Yuriy, I believe. We know digitalized decriminalization is in the vogue? Or do you think it's actually an actionable tool? Or do you think it's done for the sake of following some sort of fashion? Good morning, dear audience. Good morning, distinguished speakers. And I'd like to start with the following. Corruption requires mutual consent. So there are two parties willing to make some sort of an agreement, and that can result in corruption. What I mean is not the corruption regarding the decision-making, where, as far as the goods distribution is concerned, such as land or property, but I mean the sort of corruption where the local government does some sort of decision-making. In fact, if it takes a person to take this decision, one needs to think, how can be the decision maker limited, so to say? If a process does not require human participation, then utmost steps must be taken to exclude the individual and to leave it up to the technology. Once I was talking to school children, and they asked me, what is the hardest thing about being a mayor? And that was way back in 2016. I told them that the hardest thing was the day-to-day fight with the seductions, because you face temptation every day, temptation of improving your own life or the life of your friends, and you don't have to be susceptible to that temptation. Also, back in 2016, and I'll take your question very soon, I made this decision, and the previous local council wanted to privatize a lot of communal property, and I spoke up. We organized public auctions, and only then did we sell this property. We failed to do it in 5 years, but then ProZorro procurement system was launched. So in the nearest future, we will manage to sell what is still there, what was not needed, and we will sell that online soon. We are one of the 4 cities that are at the forefront of introducing geoinformation systems. It's to do with land. You can look at all the decisions, you can look at the location of this land plot at the cadastre map. So we have the land cadastre, and we want to create certain conditions for building certain objects. Therefore, we want to exclude corruption from the decision-making in this field. As regards the budget, in 2018, I think, it was the first time that we created a digital map of the budget, where all expenses are mapped on the city map, so that the citizens could see how the funds are allocated, whether it's proportionate or not. Sometimes one bids, and you can look at the outcome in ProZorro system. You can see what was sold, what was the price, etc. And by the way, I welcome the creation and establishment of ProZorro system, because it gets in the way of facing someone's temptation. As regards the decision-making on the budget, we strive to make it even more public today. There are public hearings and discussions on budgets held today. But as Mr. Klitschko mentioned, you're aware of the corruption that he brought up. But, you know, it's all about how funds are distributed for the districts, for the local councillors. You know, it takes some sort of central government decisions on how funds are allocated per person, per square meter, or per community. Generally, as far all things digital are concerned. And once I was addressing an IT forum in the city of Lviv. That was, I think, way in 2016 too. I mentioned that in Ukraine there are many land cadasters and registries that should have been linked a long time ago, years ago. And that would prevent corruption in some way. And we are getting there today. We have a smartphone app called DIA, or Action, where different registers are linked. In the future, I hope we will have some piece of software that would enable us to issue permits for construction works, or to check the possibility to develop or not to develop certain area, etc. And finally, the Ministry of Digital Transformation needs to think about the following. Some things seem extremely similar. For example, the cities of Kyiv, the city of Mykolaiv, and the city of Trostyanets. There are some very similar processes happening there, such as the public services. And a piece of software should have been created years ago and handed out to all the cities and villages, and then you should just list the amount of services available, and updates would be for everyone. And Apple does not create a separate operating system for separate smartphones. Likewise should be done as far as public services are concerned, because they are the very same for all of us. Oleksandr, thank you so much. Your remarks are very smart, but you have not answered my question. Do you think the citizens are actually using those services? And is there some sort of feedback? Do they actually check the budget? If they see some inconsistency, do they bring it up? Is it usable? Are they actually using it? Our geo-portal with the budget map has seen 150,000 views. The population of the city of Mykolaiv is approximately 480,000. So I believe an ordinary citizen of Mykolaiv is not particularly interested in how funds are distributed. Ukrainians think as follows: well, all of them steal. They're regular people, you elect them, they do some stealing. It doesn't really matter if it's a mayor, a member of parliament, the president, or the local councillor. As soon as they come to power, they start stealing from us. And those are the tools mostly for the media, because the false state consistently uncovers certain things, makes them public, and then the journalists start reporting on that. So the interested persons need to have the access. The other day we were talking about the civic budget. So an opportunity for an ordinary citizens to use the budget funds through the participatory democracy tool, such as participatory budget. Now, sometimes people look up if funds were allocated for the roads or the playgrounds, but I don't think that anybody is meticulously studying these tools, including the big data tools that we created. Oleksandr, thank you. And this makes a good segue to Trostyanets. I have a different question for you. The International Republican Institute is doing an annual survey, and they show the discrepancy between the community priorities and what people believe the mayors are doing best. For example, for the last year, it was related to the level of healthcare services. Well, because there was an unexpected challenge in that field. And 37% believe it's a priority, but I believe that it was executed only at the level of 4%. It's true for the corruption, it's true for the environment. Parks tend to be quite a low priority. I mean, it's high for urban life, but it's not a priority for this survey specifically. So, here's my question to the mayor of Trostyanets. Why have you selected? Because you have a healthcare success story under your belt, but that was before coronavirus challenge broke out. So why would the local government address roads because it's visible, as opposed to something less visible, such as fighting corruption? Why? Is it just because it's more costly or more difficult or more effort-taking? Yuriy, we can't hear you. You need to unmute your microphone. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ukraine. Good morning to our international partners attending this conference. Thank you for having me. To answer your question, I have to say the following. We started looking into the healthcare field a bit earlier than the rest of the country. There are 1,480 of amalgamated communities in Ukraine now, and they define the future. The best reform happening in Ukraine so far is the decentralization, to transfer the administrative powers to the local communities and local self-government. Therefore, it is the local community now that has a say, that defines the future life, defines the priority. Should it be the road renovation or park improvement or building a stadium or a hospital, etc. And frankly, I prepared some slides. I'm trying to put them on screen at the moment, if you don't mind. Please bear with me for a second. Yes, and I'm getting some help for the slides. You can see the slide, can you? Yes, we can. This slide demonstrates where we are right now. Our community is located basically on the Russian border, as mentioned at the beginning of the conference, and there's significant impact. So these are the challenges that conquest can happen anytime, any minute. And it's a big challenge for the local government, because the living standards should be so high so that people would really put their life on the line to fight for independence. They have to know exactly what it is they are defending. And therefore, the next slide, please. The next slide, please. Therefore, it's critical that we do our budgeting properly. Here you can see the trends for the budget. This is how the community lived in the past. The population is almost 28,000. You see how it was in the past and how the situation transformed when we became an amalgamated community. The central government also delegated our funds for managing land resources. And I draw to your attention that our land budget is 3 times compared to the past, because now we can manage our own land. So small communities that have rural territories and have the powers now, not even the regional capitals, but I mean that rural population will have resources to effect change. But what should be the direction of this change? I mentioned hospitals, and I'll come back to your questions, but I'll quickly cover other fields. We invest in the mindset and education, because once the Polish people said, if you want to be a successful city or a successful community, you have to invest. Invest in the mindset of your children. Invest in your schools. And we are doing utmost to ensure that the level of education of our communities is sublime. We invest in equipment. The funding has been significantly stepped up. We have the best multimedia equipment in our schools. It's both for the junior school and for senior school, and we teach different subject. And we have e-diaries that are missing in many cities of Ukraine, and they best work in the city of Trostyanets. This program originated in Lithuania and also reduces corruption risks in teachers. Inaudible. Inaudible. We're doing an utmost to improve the facilities of the schools. Inaudible. Inaudible. Interpretation impossible due to technical setbacks. The parents these days have to provide funds for the schools. They need to chip in for the equipment, chip in for the furniture, etc. It's endemic in Ukraine, but we rooted out this practice by having the ownership. Yuriy, you only have 4.5 minutes. Please address my question. Iryna, I'll go very quickly. So we rooted out this corruption because we banned the schools to take the parents' money for whatever aim, for renovation, etc. We used budget funds to renovate the classrooms. You see the before and after the classrooms by using millions of hryvnias. Now, let me address the hospitals. This is a typical district hospitals that is now our property. In the past, there were overblown personnel. Some people recruited way too many staff members than needed. And there was lack of funds to provide the energy supply, to fund the equipment, to renovate the wards, etc. You see in the screen, this was what happened in the past, and the local government banned to collect any funds from the patients. No charity, nothing. We had to do it ourselves, to leave these things in the past, in the Soviet Union, so that a new reality would enter our hospitals. So let me tell you, this all had consequences, so that people had no longer job in the insecurity. In the past, the citizen mistrusted the healthcare reform, and this is what we did. So we eradicated all sham offices to reduce the staffing, rooted out corruption. We banned any sort of charitable contribution. We looked at the best practices internationally, how they renovated their hospitals. We provided computers and software to the hospitals. We provided e-appointments, rooted out any sort of lines or queues, because trying to jump the queues was an avenue for petty corruption. Oleksandr, you're making a great case, but unfortunately we're running out of time. Now, just to sum up, I'll say a few points and then also give you the floor to make some sort of conclusion. I believe we have no other way but to fight corruption, including petty corruption. The other day, I had a meeting with the city of Lublin, and they work a lot with their counterparts in Ukrainian cities. And I was impressed with the number of Ukrainian university students who stay in Poland. They create every condition, including tax requirements, so that this young Ukrainian talent does not get back to Ukraine. Ukrainian work migrants live there and they work hard, but they will never come back. Even when Ukraine offers a higher salary, they would not go back. So it's about the feeling of dignity in 10 years' time, so that we could actually compete, as opposed to ended up in penury of talent. The petty corruption is the most difficult thing to tackle, because this is the most widespread practice faced by Ukrainian citizens. And the recent survey of the Republican Institute provides striking figures that at least 5 times per year people need a permit to open up a business or address their issue regarding school or healthcare. So thank you for providing the success story. We are aware that certain change requires much resources and time and effort. But we are citizens and we are indignant. We want the change now. But you mentioned it's the 30th anniversary of independence, and some people believe more could be done during this time. So thank you for progress. Thank you for your efforts. I am partial to what you said, that it's about joint effort, that we need to engage those who complain and identify corruption and detect it and fight it, that cooperation with the central government needs to be in place. I do hope that there is no turning back, that we shall indeed prevail because we're a dignified, democratic, free nation. If there are some comments or remarks on conclusion that you want the Ukrainians to hear, the floor is yours. Vitali.
I'll be brief. We need to learn from success stories elsewhere, from Poland, Slovakia, work closely with our partners, learn from them, and not have to reinvent the wheel. Put it in our safety deposit box and contextualize it then. So learn from successful cases. We've learned a lot from Georgia, and by talking to our partners, we need to learn from them and put it to use. If it works in a different country, we need to process it and apply at home. The flight is on, and I would like to report you about the deliverables. When every person studying in Poland would want to go back home, to his home country, to his parents, seeing good job prospects and being well protected. And the key word that's been actual in Ukraine, that is justice, the rule of law. Couldn't agree with you more. Mr. Oleksandr, your final say in this panel? I'd like to say that what Ukraine needs most is comprehensive digitalization. It's important so that we can pool our ranks and make the decision-making process as transparent as it can be. It's important that the government make sure that the people who go to the audit agencies and governmental agencies earn decent pay, so that it would eradicate the risks. When I visited the US and I asked whether police officers would take a bribe, and they replied, given our social protection and the profession which we see a vocation, we would never take a bribe. And when a person can take a bribe that is more than his monthly pay, that's just not right. So the risk and benefit should be set right. And this needs to be tackled at the governmental level. And importantly, we need to raise the professional level of the people working in the controlling agencies, as we would receive some initiatives that are unprofessional. And I'd like the people who have a mandate to take on corruption be professional. And then brings us back to the idea that for a person to be a professional, he needs to retain a decent pay, to stay in the profession and not go into business. Mr. Yuriy, you say, you know, the trust with the government has to be enjoyed by the residents and the investors. And I'd like to advise the Ukrainians to elect the government that is capable of implementing reforms, that can learn from best practices. I would advise them steering away from political motives, but doing the daily specific work. The best example I like giving brings us back to our city. In Poland, they shut down an enterprise to open it in Trostyanets, creating new job and decent pay, the highest in the region. And that is the high standard of living. And it should be manifest everywhere in the public transportation, schools and hospitals, different digital solutions, eradicating solutions, and creating well-being for the people. And that is the best that can happen. Thank you. And now let's get down to work.